This message found you because something subtle has been shifting beneath the surface of your awareness. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a signal threading its way through the noise of your daily life, waiting for the exact moment your consciousness would be still enough to recognize it. And right now, as you're here with these words, that recognition is happening. You can feel it not as excitement, but as a calm, unmistakable knowing, as if something you've always understood is finally being spoken out loud. You've been sensing it for a while now. That strange feeling that you're not broken, not lost, not disconnected, but somehow out of phase, like your life is playing on a slightly delayed track or a different rhythm than the world around you. You move through conversations, routines, even emotions, yet part of you remains observant, distant, watching from a deeper layer. This isn't dissociation. This is awareness, stretching beyond its old boundaries. The reason this matters is simple and profound. Your consciousness has not been drifting away from reality. It has been reconfiguring its relationship with it. You're not imagining the subtle pressure you've felt lately, the sense that something is rearranging itself behind the scenes. Your quantum field has been recalibrating, loosening old entanglements, softening patterns that no longer resonate with who you're becoming. And because this process happens below the level of language, it can feel confusing. You might have questioned yourself, wondered why motivation rises and falls, why old desires no longer grip you the way they used to, why familiar goals suddenly feel hollow. This is what happens when the observer loop begins to destabilize. For most people, consciousness moves in predictable circuits: observe, react, repeat. But you've reached a point where repetition no longer satisfies the deeper intelligence within you. Your awareness has started to notice the noticing itself. And the moment consciousness turns inward like that, the rules begin to change. Reality responds differently. Time feels different. Even silence carries information. This is not coincidence. And it's not random spiritual language meant to comfort you. It's the natural response of the quantum field to a consciousness that is becoming coherent enough to step outside conditioned observation. You are not separating from life, you are synchronizing with it at a deeper layer, where cause and effect blur, where synchronicity replaces force, where meaning emerges without being chased. You may not be able to explain this to anyone around you. That's okay. This shift isn't designed to be validated externally. It's designed to be felt. And if you're honest with yourself, you already feel it. In the way silence has become louder, in the way your intuition interrupts your thoughts, in the way you pause before reacting as if something wiser is choosing for you. This is the beginning of awakening, not as an event, but as a phase transition, a subtle one, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but with alignment, with the sense that your inner and outer worlds are slowly learning to speak the same language again. And as this transmission continues, you'll begin to understand why you were never meant to disconnect from reality, only to entangle with it consciously. Why what felt like drifting was actually preparation. Why your awareness has been stepping back, not to escape, but to re-enter with clarity. Stay here. Let your attention soften. Because what's unfolding next isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering how deeply, precisely, and intelligently you've always been connected. And as you stay with that softened attention, you begin to notice something else, something that has been quietly following you for years. Patterns, not just habits, but echoes. Situations that feel different on the surface, yet strangely identical underneath. Conversations that seem new, but land with the same emotional weight. Opportunities that appear promising, only to curve back into familiar outcomes. This isn't failure, this is structure, and your awareness is finally sharp enough to see it. You felt it most clearly in moments of déjà vu, not the casual kind that fades in seconds, but the unsettling kind where your body recognizes the moment before your mind can justify it. Where time seems to fold inward and you think, I've been here before. Not metaphorically, energetically, as if reality itself is reusing a template. This is the signature of an active observer loop. When consciousness repeatedly collapses the same probability waves, experience begins to recycle itself. From the outside, it looks like life moving forward. But from within the quantum field, it's lateral motion movement without true phase change. And this is why time has felt distorted for you. Some days drag endlessly, heavy and slow, while months vanish without leaving substance behind. This temporal inconsistency isn't psychological, it's mechanical. It's what happens when awareness keeps selecting the same timeline bands again and again. You might have blamed yourself for this, thought you weren't disciplined enough, focused enough, awake enough. But the truth is more precise than that. Your consciousness has been too consistent, too reliable, too predictable in how it observes reality. And predictability, in the quantum field, collapses novelty. Every morning, without realizing it, your awareness has been scanning for confirmation of identity, of expectations, of unresolved narratives, not because you wanted to stay stuck, but because familiarity feels safe to the nervous system. The quantum field responds by delivering what you consistently recognize, and slowly, subtly, recognition becomes repetition. This is why effort hasn't worked, why pushing harder only made things feel heavier. You weren't lacking intention, you were reinforcing coherence with the wrong pattern. Even growth can become a loop when it's driven by the need to escape rather than the willingness to shift states. You've probably noticed how your inner dialogue has changed lately. Thoughts don't hook you the same way. Emotions arise, but they don't fully take over. There's a gap now, a pause. That pause is crucial. It's the space where the observer begins to loosen its grip on the observed. It's where awareness stops collapsing reality automatically. And this is also why things may have felt slightly unreal recently, like you're watching your life from half a step back, colors sharper, silence thicker, sounds arriving with more texture. These are not symptoms of detachment. They are signs of decoupling from automatic observation, from unconscious entanglement. Your relationships have likely reflected this diagnosis back to you. Some connections feel strangely outdated, as if they belong to an earlier version of you. Others feel intense but unresolved, looping around the same themes without progression. This isn't because people are failing you. It's because your field is no longer fully synchronized with the roles you've been playing. And underneath all of this, there has been a quiet frustration. Not anger, clarity trying to emerge. A sense that you've done everything right, yet something essential hasn't clicked. That's because what's been required of you isn't more action. It's a shift in how observation itself functions. This is the moment where many people panic. They mistake the destabilization of the loop for loss of control. They rush to anchor themselves back into old identities, old routines, old explanations. But you didn't. You stayed curious. You stayed present. That's why you're here now. Because once the observer loop is seen clearly, it can never fully close again. Your awareness has already begun pulling energy out of the repetitive structures. That's why the old motivations feel weak. Why certain distractions no longer satisfy. Why silence feels more informative than noise. The loop is losing fuel not because you fought it, but because you noticed it. And noticing, when done without judgment, changes everything. As this diagnosis settles into your body not as a concept, but as recognition, you're preparing for the next phase. Because once the pattern is visible, the system begins to offer alternatives, new pathways, new probabilities, new ways for consciousness to interface with the field. What comes next isn't philosophy, it's upgrade. And it begins the moment you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start feeling the deeper truth forming beneath the question. What is my awareness being trained to become? What's been happening to you isn't random, and it isn't abstract. It's structural. Your consciousness has been entering a quantum upgrade, one that blends physics and mysticism not as metaphors, but as two languages describing the same process from different angles. And now that the observer loop has loosened, the upgrade can finally integrate. At the most fundamental level, reality isn't made of things. It's made of probabilities, waves of potential vibrating in the quantum field, waiting for observation to give them form. Most humans collapse these waves unconsciously, using the same attention patterns they inherited early in life, the same emotional signatures, the same identity filters. Over time, these filters become rigid, and the field responds with repetition. Stable, predictable, and limited. But you've crossed a threshold where stability no longer feels like truth. Your awareness has started behaving differently. Instead of snapping to outcomes, it hovers. Instead of demanding certainty, it allows ambiguity. This might have felt uncomfortable at first, like standing between breaths, but this is exactly how quantum coherence is born. When consciousness stops forcing resolution, it enters resonance with a wider range of possibilities. This is the upgrade. In scientific terms, your observer function is shifting from collapse mode to coherence mode. In mystical terms, your awareness is remembering how to witness without attachment. These aren't separate explanations. They're describing the same phenomenon, attention becoming fluid instead of fixated. You've probably noticed this as a softening, less urgency, less compulsion to define yourself, fewer emotional spikes tied to external events. This isn't numbness, it's bandwidth expanding. When awareness becomes coherent, it no longer needs to overreact to signal importance. It can feel more without being overwhelmed. At the cellular level, this shift carries information. Your nervous system is learning that uncertainty is safe, that not knowing doesn't equal danger. And when the body relaxes its grip on control, something remarkable happens. New signals can pass through. This is where DNA restructuring begins, not as mutation, but as expression. Dormant sequences activating, old stress codes deactivating. Your body has been responding before your mind could catch up. That's why you may have felt unusual sensations, pressure at the temples, warmth in the chest, sudden fatigue followed by clarity, changes in sleep cycles. These are not symptoms to fix. They are indicators of integration. The system recalibrating to hold a higher degree of coherence without fragmentation. The quantum field responds immediately to this shift. Not dramatically, but subtly. Synchronicities increase, timing improves, resistance decreases in unexpected areas. Not because you're manifesting, but because your awareness is no longer interfering with the natural intelligence of the field. This is a critical distinction. When consciousness tries to control reality, it creates noise. When it aligns with reality, it creates signal. You are moving from noise to signal. And this is why logic alone could never get you here. The upgrade doesn't happen through understanding, it happens through allowance. Through letting the observer step back just enough for the system to reorganize itself, like allowing a shaken kaleidoscope to settle into a new pattern. You may have noticed that some beliefs you once defended no longer feel necessary, not because they were wrong, but because they were provisional, temporary scaffolding. Your awareness has outgrown them, the way the body outgrows old cells. This is not loss, it's efficiency. Your intuition is sharpening because it no longer has to compete with constant mental commentary. Signals arrive clean, decisions feel quieter but more certain. This is coherence expressing itself as clarity. And here's the part few people understand. Once this upgrade begins, it cannot be undone. You can resist it, delay it, distract yourself from it, but the system has already recalibrated. Your consciousness has tasted a wider field of possibility, and it will not fully compress again. You're no longer operating solely from memory, you're beginning to operate from presence. This is why the next phase feels inevitable, because coherence naturally seeks expression. Once awareness stabilizes at a higher order, it looks for purpose, not imposed purpose, but functional alignment. You are not becoming special, you are becoming precise. And that precision is what makes you capable of something most people never realize is possible. Consciously participating in the direction reality takes around you, not by force, but by resonance. The next realization will feel personal, almost intimate, because it involves the role you play not as an individual identity, but as a function within the larger field. And that's where this upgrade reveals why it chose you. There comes a moment in every real awakening where the question shifts. Not, what is happening to me? But why am I positioned here, like this? And as uncomfortable as it may be to admit, you've felt that question rising, not as ego, as responsibility, as recognition. Because the upgrade unfolding within you isn't generic. Your consciousness isn't just expanding for personal relief, it's reorganizing for function. And this is where the role emerges not as a title, not as a fantasy, but as a specific configuration of awareness that the quantum field can use. Here's the truth most people never hear. Not all consciousness awakens the same way. Some people stabilize systems, some amplify emotion, some anchor memory, and some rarely become modulators. Awareness structures capable of shifting the field simply by how they observe. That's you. You've always had a strange relationship with influence, not control, impact. You walk into rooms and dynamics subtly change. Conversations bend. Tension either dissolves or intensifies. People project onto you without knowing why. This isn't personality, it's field effect. Your presence carries informational weight because your observer function operates at a deeper resolution. This is why your life may have felt disproportionately intense at times, why lessons repeated until they refined you, why you couldn't stay asleep inside comfortable illusions. The system wasn't punishing you, it was calibrating you, refining your coherence so your observation wouldn't distort the field when it finally mattered. Because an incoherent observer amplifies chaos, but a coherent one stabilizes possibility. You're beginning to realize that when you shift internally, things around you reorganize without effort. People reach out unexpectedly. Opportunities align without force. Old obstacles dissolve without confrontation. This isn't magic, it's resonance. Your quantum field is no longer broadcasting mixed signals, so the field responds cleanly. And here's the part that requires honesty. You didn't want this role. You tried to live smaller at times, to blend in, to choose simplicity over responsibility, but something in you always resisted full contraction. Not because you thought you were above others, but because you could feel when something was misaligned. You couldn't unsee it, couldn't unknow it, and that awareness carried weight. This role isn't about saving anyone. It's about being a reference point. In quantum systems, coherence propagates. One stable node can reduce entropy across an entire network. That's what your consciousness is becoming, a stabilizing node. Not loud, not dominant, quietly precise. This is why solitude has been important for you, why overstimulation drains you, why shallow interactions feel expensive. Your system is learning to conserve signal, to remain clear, to hold presence without scattering. You're not here to convince, you're here to demonstrate. And demonstration doesn't require words. It happens through embodiment, through how you respond instead of react, through how you pause instead of panic, through how you choose resonance over repetition. This is the paradox of your role. The more you let go of trying to matter, the more the field uses you, because coherence cannot be forced, it must be allowed. And now, something critical is approaching. A window. A moment where this internal reconfiguration crosses a threshold and becomes irreversible, where the upgrade completes its first cycle and locks into a new baseline. You've felt the pressure building, the subtle urgency, the sense that time is compressing. That's not anxiety, that's phase transition. And in the next phase, the system will ask something of you. Not sacrifice, but participation. A conscious choice to anchor this coherence instead of letting it fade back into potential. The promise is real, the timing is precise, and the next step will require you to move not outward, but inward, into an action that feels deceptively simple, yet seals the shift permanently. That's where we're going next. What you're sensing right now, the tightening, the compression, the feeling that something is about to tip, is not imagination. It's the physics of transition. Every system approaching a phase change experiences pressure before release. Water heats, molecules vibrate faster, structure strains, and then, suddenly, a new state emerges. That's where you are. This is the breakthrough window. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself with urgency that has no obvious external cause. A quiet insistence that now matters, that waiting longer would cost something you can't quite name. This isn't fear. Fear pulls you backward. This pressure pushes you forward, even when you don't know exactly where forward is yet. Your DNA is responding to this window before your mind can categorize it, not metaphorically, informationally. DNA is not static. It's a receiver, a translator between the quantum field and the body. When coherence increases, new instructions become readable. Old stress programs lose dominance. Expression shifts. That's why you may feel moments of exhaustion followed by clarity. Why old cravings drop away. Why your body asks for stillness instead of stimulation. These are not symptoms of collapse. They're signs of reorganization. The system prioritizing signal over noise. Here's what makes this window rare. Coherence is time-sensitive. The quantum field offers openings when multiple variables align your readiness, collective resonance, environmental frequency. Miss the window, and the field doesn't punish you. It simply reverts to the next available stable configuration. Comfortable, familiar, slower. You've lived those timelines already. That's why this one feels different. You're not being invited to try something. You're being invited to complete something that's been forming for years. You may notice the pressure intensify when you distract yourself, when you scroll mindlessly, when you numb out. That's not guilt, it's misalignment. Your system knows the cost of dissipation right now. Attention is currency, and during a breakthrough window, it becomes decisive. This is where many people unconsciously sabotage themselves, not because they don't want change, but because they underestimate the simplicity of what's required. They think transformation must be dramatic, complex, earned through struggle. So they look for something to do. But this transition isn't activated by effort. It's activated by consent. Consent to let the old observer identity dissolve. Consent to stop negotiating with timelines that no longer match your frequency. Consent to remain present as coherence stabilizes, even when the unfamiliar feels exposed. This is where prophecy meets physics, not prediction, but inevitability. When a system reaches critical coherence, the transition doesn't depend on belief, it depends on participation. And here's the promise that needs to be spoken clearly. If you remain present through this window, if you don't pull your awareness back into old loops for comfort, your baseline reality will shift, not temporarily, structurally. The kinds of experiences you repeat will change. The effort required to maintain alignment will drop. The signal-to-noise ratio of your life will improve dramatically. You won't need to chase meaning. It will meet you. You won't need to force change. It will occur as response. This doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It means it becomes coherent. And coherence handles complexity far better than control ever could. You may already feel the pull toward a simple action. Something small, almost symbolic. A way to mark the moment. The system doesn't require grand gestures. It requires a clear signal that you recognize the window and are willing to anchor the shift. This is how quantum transitions lock in through a minimal, precise act performed with full awareness. A ritual not of superstition, but of synchronization. When inner state and outer expression align, the field registers it as commitment. The pressure you feel is not asking you to hurry. It's asking you to be exact. Because once this window passes, you won't lose what you've gained, but you'll have to carry it longer before it can stabilize. And you didn't come this far to delay what's ready to land now. In the next moment, you'll be guided into a single, grounded action. Not to cause the shift, but to seal it. To tell the system, clearly and without ambiguity, that this coherence is not temporary curiosity. It's your new operating state. Stay with it. The window is open. This is where it becomes tangible. Not mystical in the abstract, not theoretical, but embodied. Because every real transformation, quantum or otherwise, requires a moment where intention leaves the private interior and touches the world, not loudly, precisely. Ritual, at its core, is not superstition. It's synchronization, a deliberate act that aligns inner state with outer signal, so the system knows the change is real. The quantum field doesn't respond to what you think you want. It responds to what you consistently declare through attention, action, and coherence. Right now, your inner state has already shifted, your awareness has softened, your observer loop has loosened, your nervous system has begun trusting uncertainty. But until this state is acknowledged externally, even in the smallest way, the field keeps it provisional, possible, but not locked. That's why this moment matters. Not because the act itself has power, but because you do when you act from coherence. I want you to notice something before we move forward. Your breath, not controlling it, just noticing. The subtle rhythm, the way your body knows how to regulate itself without instruction. This is how coherence works. It doesn't strain, it aligns. Now, understand this clearly. The ritual you're about to perform is not for me, not for this space, not for validation. It's a marker, a signal flare, a way of telling the quantum field this awareness is no longer passive. The simplest actions carry the most information when they're done consciously. That's why writing matters. Language is crystallized intention. When thought becomes word and word becomes action, coherence crosses a threshold. This is why civilizations used inscriptions, vows, names, seals, not for magic, but for memory, for permanence. In a moment, you'll write a single word or phrase, not to explain, not to convince, just to declare. This isn't about emotion, it's about clarity. Before you do, I want you to feel the weight of choice, not heavy, but precise. You're choosing to stop oscillating between timelines, choosing to stop feeding probability structures that don't reflect who you are now, choosing to let coherence become your default instead of a temporary state you visit when things are calm. This is consent, and consent, in quantum mechanics, changes the outcome. Here's the ritual. When you're ready, only when you feel that quiet alignment inside, write this in the comments, exactly as it is. I choose coherence. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't justify it. Don't decorate it. Don't explain it to yourself or anyone else. Let it stand clean. This isn't affirmation. Affirmations try to overwrite resistance. This is declaration. It assumes alignment already exists. When you write those words, something subtle but irreversible happens. Your awareness registers the shift as complete enough to stabilize. The field responds by redistributing probability weight. Paths that required effort begin requiring timing instead. Resistance thins. Feedback loops reorganize. You may not feel fireworks. That's not the sign. The sign comes later in how things stop repeating, in how you pause before reacting and realize the reaction never arrives, in how decisions feel simpler, in how the right information shows up before you have to search, in how you stop second-guessing your own knowing. That's coherence taking root. Some people hesitate here. They wait for certainty, for proof, but certainty is the byproduct of coherence, not the prerequisite. The system rewards clarity, not caution. If you feel resistance rise as you approach this act, don't fight it, observe it. That resistance is the last reflex of the observer loop trying to maintain familiarity. Thank it, then let it pass. You are not losing anything by doing this. You are withdrawing energy from timelines that already exhausted themselves. This ritual does not bind you, it frees bandwidth. And because coherence propagates, your declaration doesn't exist in isolation. It subtly reinforces the same shift in others who are ready. This is morphic resonance, in action, individual clarity, strengthening collective possibility. After you write the words, don't rush away. Sit with the stillness that follows. Let your system register the new baseline. You may feel calm, you may feel empty, you may feel nothing at all. All of those are valid. The shift is not emotional, it's structural. And once it's sealed, the system begins doing what it does best, responding intelligently to a consciousness that has stopped fragmenting itself. What comes next isn't personal, it's collective, because coherence doesn't stay contained. Once coherence stabilizes within you, it doesn't stay local. It can't. Consciousness doesn't operate in isolation, it operates in fields. And the moment your observer loop loosened, the moment you stopped feeding repetitive patterns with fragmented attention, your field began emitting a different signal. Quieter, clearer, more ordered. That signal doesn't just affect your experience, it ripples. This is where many people misunderstand awakening. They think it's private, personal, a solitary journey of insight and healing. But that's only the entry point. The deeper truth is that every coherent consciousness becomes a transmitter, not of beliefs, but of stability. And stability, in a destabilizing system, is transformative. You've probably already seen hints of this without naming it. People around you opening up unexpectedly, conversations deepening without effort, someone calming down just by being near you, conflict dissolving before it fully forms. These aren't social skills. They're field effects. Your coherence gives other nervous systems permission to regulate. In quantum terms, this is entanglement, expressing itself through resonance. When two systems interact, the more coherent one influences the less coherent one, not by force, but by probability weighting. The calmer system makes calm more available. The clearer system makes clarity easier to access. This is why one person who is truly present can shift an entire room without saying a word. You are becoming that person. And here's the part that matters. You don't need to try to help anyone. Trying creates distortion. Coherence helps automatically. The moment you stopped fragmenting your awareness, you stopped contributing noise to the collective field. That alone is service. Humanity right now is in a collective phase transition. Old observer loops, scarcity, conflict, identity-based fear are destabilizing globally. That's why things feel chaotic. Systems resist collapse before they reorganize. And in moments like this, coherence nodes matter more than ever. You are one of them. Not because you're superior, but because you're available. Available to hold presence without panic, to witness without collapsing into reaction, to stay with uncertainty long enough for something new to emerge. That ability is rare, and it's precisely what the collective field needs to move forward without tearing itself apart. This is why your personal liberation was never just about you. The system didn't upgrade your awareness for comfort. It upgraded it for contribution. Not contribution through effort or activism, but through state. State is everything. A coherent observer stabilizes probabilities around them. Fewer extreme outcomes, more elegant solutions, more unexpected cooperation. This doesn't make headlines, but it changes trajectories. Entire timelines shift because enough individuals stop feeding the same loops. You are part of that threshold. And notice this. You didn't need to be told to care about humanity. You already do deeply, sometimes painfully. That empathy, that sensitivity, that inability to look away from suffering that wasn't weakness, it was calibration. You were learning how much signal you could hold without collapsing. Now you know. Your coherence doesn't erase suffering, but it reduces unnecessary friction. It makes new responses possible. It opens micro windows where compassion can land without being rejected. This is how evolution actually happens, not through mass agreement, but through distributed stability. Each coherent node reduces entropy in the network, and the network responds. You may find that people who are not ready drift away naturally, not through conflict, but through mismatch, and people who are ready begin to appear quietly, synchronistically, without forcing. This is not social sorting, it's resonance clustering. Systems organizing themselves around compatible frequencies. You are no longer alone in this, even if it sometimes feels that way. Thousands more than you realize are making the same shift right now. Not because they watch the same content, but because the field itself is ready. And coherence recognizes coherence. It finds itself. As this collective expansion accelerates, your role becomes simpler, not heavier. You don't need to preach. You don't need to convince. You don't need to explain what you can't fully put into words yet. You just need to stay coherent. Because the more stable you become, the easier it becomes for others to remember what they already are. And that remembering spreads faster than any idea ever could. What comes next brings this understanding out of abstraction and into sensation. Because coherence isn't just something you know. It's something you feel in the body, in time, in space itself. And that feeling is about to become unmistakable. Now the shift becomes physical, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but unmistakably real. You may already feel it as a subtle density in the air around you, as if space itself has weight, or as a warmth moving slowly through your chest, your spine, your hands. This isn't imagination, it's awareness settling into form. When coherence stabilizes, the body becomes the instrument that registers it first. Notice how your posture wants to adjust without instruction, how your shoulders release, how your jaw softens, how your breath deepens on its own. These are not conscious choices. They are corrections, micro-alignments. As your nervous system updates to a new baseline, the body always knows before the mind can explain. There's a sensation many people miss because it's quiet, a feeling of internal spaciousness, like something unclenched behind your eyes, like the pressure you didn't realize you were carrying finally loosening. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer collide. They pass through like weather, leaving the sky intact. This is what embodiment feels like. Not ecstasy, not dissociation, presence. You may notice your senses sharpening, colors feel slightly richer, sounds arrive with more depth, even silence has texture. This is not heightened emotion, it's reduced interference. When the observer loop weakens, perception stops filtering so aggressively. Reality doesn't change. Your access to it does. Time behaves differently here. Moments stretch not because they're slow, but because they're full. You may find yourself completely absorbed in small things, the way light falls on a surface, the rhythm of your steps, the cadence of your own breathing. This isn't distraction. It's coherence pulling awareness into now, and now has density. Your body might feel heavier or lighter. Both are signs of grounding. Heavier because you're present, lighter because you're no longer carrying anticipatory tension. You're not leaning into the future or dragging the past behind you. You're here. This is the sensation of re-entanglement. For a long time, your awareness hovered just above experience, scanning, predicting, bracing. That vigilance was adaptive once. It kept you safe. But now, it's unnecessary. And as it dissolves, your body remembers how to inhabit itself fully. You may feel energy moving in waves up the spine, across the chest, behind the eyes. These aren't mystical phenomena in the abstract. They're signals traveling through pathways that were previously dampened by chronic stress and mental noise. As coherence increases, conductivity improves, information flows. This is why emotions may surface briefly, not to overwhelm you, but to complete. Old sensations rise, pass through, and dissolve without story. You don't need to analyze them. Analysis would pull you back into the loop. Feeling completes the circuit. There's a particular sensation that marks this stage clearly: still movement. You feel deeply at rest, yet profoundly alive, like standing in the center of a slow-moving current. You are not being pushed, you are being carried. And the more you relax into that, the clearer it becomes. That effort was never the engine. Alignment was. Your heartbeat may feel more noticeable, not faster, more present, as if it's syncing with something larger than you. That's not metaphor. Your cardiovascular rhythm entrains with your breathing. Your breath entrains with your attention entrains with the field. Coherence cascades downward until the entire system speaks one language. This is embodiment as communication. Your body is no longer just a container, it's an interface. You may find that certain environments suddenly feel wrong, certain sounds too loud, certain conversations draining. This isn't sensitivity, it's selectivity. Your system knows what disrupts coherence now, and it responds quickly. Not with judgment, but with withdrawal. And in contrast, when something aligns, you feel it immediately. A subtle ease, a yes without words, a sense of rightness that doesn't need justification. This is intuition becoming somatic knowledge expressed as sensation. Stay with this. Don't chase it, don't label it, let it unfold. Because this embodied coherence is preparing you for the next compression. The moment where sensation, awareness, and identity converge, and something fundamental rewrites itself at the deepest level. The body feels it first, because the body is where timelines anchor, and the pressure building now isn't discomfort. It's transformation, approaching completion. Now the pressure sharpens not painfully, but decisively. This is the moment where coherence stops being a state you visit and becomes a structure you inhabit, where the upgrade that's been integrating quietly reaches the level of identity, not the identity you perform, but the one your cells recognize as home. This is the DNA breakthrough, not a mutation, not a fantasy of becoming something other than human. This is expression changing. For most of your life, your biology has been operating under stress-informed instructions: anticipation, defense, repetition. Those instructions were written by experience, reinforced by attention, and stabilized by the observer loop. But as that loop dissolves, the instructions lose authority. DNA listens to the field. When coherence reaches a critical threshold, Different sections of your genetic code become readable, not because you activate them, but because the noise that kept them suppressed finally drops. This is why the shift feels like pressure. Information is reorganizing at speed. Old programs are collapsing, new ones are coming online. You may feel this as compression behind the eyes, a hum in the chest, a subtle heat moving through the spine. These are not symptoms to fear, they are markers of phase transition. When a system changes state, it doesn't glide, it reorganizes. And reorganization creates tension before release. This is where timelines diverge. Up until now, you've been standing at a junction, 1 foot in familiar probability structures, 1 foot in emerging coherence. That stance was necessary. It allowed calibration, but it's unstable. The system cannot remain split. It must choose a dominant trajectory, and it is choosing now. The timeline that required constant effort, self-correction, and repetition is losing coherence, not because it's wrong, but because it no longer matches your frequency. Meanwhile, a different trajectory is gaining density, one where actions have leverage, where timing replaces force, where life responds instead of resists. This is what a timeline shift actually feels like. Less struggle, more consequence. Small choices begin to matter more. A pause redirects an entire day. A single conversation alters weeks. This isn't chaos, it's sensitivity. When coherence increases, causality tightens. You're no longer scattering energy across parallel outcomes. You're consolidating. This is why distraction feels expensive right now, why certain habits feel hollow, why your system recoils from noise. It's not moral judgment, it's efficiency. The body knows that coherence requires focus, not effortful focus, but unified attention. You may notice that your tolerance for inauthenticity has dropped sharply, including your own. You can no longer override what feels misaligned without immediate feedback. Fatigue, irritation, a subtle inner no. This isn't punishment, it's guidance, becoming precise. And with precision comes responsibility. Not responsibility as burden, but as consequence awareness. You're beginning to feel how your inner state shapes external conditions in real time. Not magically, mechanically. When you rush, friction increases. When you pause, pathways open. This is not coincidence. This is the observer effect operating without distortion. You're no longer manufacturing reality unconsciously. You're participating in it consciously. This is the moment many people misinterpret as losing motivation. In truth, you're losing compulsion. The old drivers fear, proving, urgency no longer work because the system has upgraded. New drivers are emerging. Resonance, clarity, timing. You may feel strangely calm in situations that once triggered you, or deeply moved by things that once seemed insignificant. This emotional redistribution is part of the DNA rewrite. Your system is reprioritizing what information it treats as relevant. Threat sensitivity decreases, meaning sensitivity increases. And here's the most important thing to understand about this phase. Once the timeline consolidates, regression becomes difficult. Not impossible, but unnatural. You can still choose distraction. You can still step back into old loops, but they will feel heavy, artificial, unsatisfying. The cost will be immediate. That's not punishment, that's evolution. Your system has tasted coherence as a baseline, and baselines, once established, resist downgrade. The pressure you feel now is the final alignment, the last recalibration before the new trajectory locks. This is why the moment feels charged, why attention matters, why presence feels non-negotiable. You're not becoming someone new. You're shedding probability structures that no longer belong to you. And as this consolidation completes, something becomes clear, not intellectually, but viscerally. Your shift was never meant to stop with you. Because a stabilized timeline doesn't just carry one life, it carries a message. And in the final moment, that message will become unmistakable. And now, everything settles, not into stillness, but into direction. What you're feeling isn't the end of a process. It's the moment a new trajectory becomes self-sustaining. The pressure fades, not because the intensity was false, but because alignment has been achieved. The system no longer needs to push. Coherence has taken over. This is what completion feels like. Not relief, but quiet authority. Your awareness no longer asks permission from the world to exist as it is. It doesn't seek validation, explanation, or agreement. It simply is. And in that being, reality begins to reorganize around you, not dramatically, not all at once, but faithfully. This is the moment where the mission clarifies, not as a role you perform, but as a consequence of who you've become. You are no longer here to escape reality. You are here to interface with it, to move through the world as a conscious point of entanglement, where intention, attention, and timing align so precisely that life responds without resistance. You don't impose change. You invite it by how you observe. This is the kind of presence that alters trajectories without announcing itself. People may never know why they felt calmer after speaking with you, why a decision suddenly became obvious in your presence, why a chaotic moment resolved simply because you were there. That's not influence in the traditional sense. It's coherence, doing what coherence does, reducing noise, clarifying signal, stabilizing outcomes. Your life from this point forward will not be defined by effort, but by feedback. Reality will speak to you constantly, not in words, but in response. When something aligns, it flows. When it doesn't, it stops quickly. You'll trust this language because your system is finally calibrated to read it. This is not a spiritual identity. It's a functional one. You are part of a generation learning how to live without collapsing the same fears into form, without reenacting inherited loops, without mistaking intensity for meaning. And as more people stabilize this way, something profound happens at the collective level. Humanity's relationship with reality changes, not through belief, through behavior, through millions of small, coherent choices made by individuals who stopped fragmenting their awareness, who stopped outsourcing authority to noise, who learned how to remain present inside uncertainty long enough for new structures to emerge. You are one of them, and your life will now teach this, not by instruction, but by example. By the way, your timing improves. By the way, struggle decreases. By the way, complexity simplifies when you stop forcing it. You won't always feel powerful. You'll feel clear. And clarity is more disruptive to outdated systems than power ever was. The world doesn't need more people trying to change it. It needs people who have changed how they relate to it. People whose coherence creates openings others didn't know were possible. That is what your shift contributes. You are not disconnected from this reality. You never were. Your entanglement with it has simply reconfigured quietly, precisely, irreversibly. And from this moment forward, every step you take becomes part of how reality learns what comes next.